All right, guys, welcome back to T Sprad's Disc Golf, or welcome to Disc Golf in general. It's going to be a video. We just go over some of the basics in disc golf and kind of give you an idea if you're just starting off. I know it can be a little daunting to get involved in the first place and just pick up a couple of discs and know what they do, or just show up to the course and know all the rules right away. So today we're just gonna get into it. I've got a list of things here that I kind of wanted to cover, give you guys an idea. Um, of what disc golf is and what we do and what kind of disc you should get. So first off, we're gonna start with super simple. It's pretty much golf if you're familiar with the golf with the frisbee. You're gonna start on a tee box. You're gonna throw it off. You're gonna try to get into the basket in as few strokes as possible. Um, so I mean, golf is the father sport. It's pretty much the same thing, same scoring system, birdie, par, bogey, etc. So all those things are the same as golf, as you'd probably be familiar with. And then first, I want to talk about how you can find where to get some frisbee golf discs, disc golf discs. If you play with somebody who plays a lot of disc golf, they're going to call it disc golf. But we know what frisbee golf is. It's the same thing, more or less. But for whatever reason, people who play a lot of disc golf are more biased towards that name than frisbee golf. But you can find courses and shops on UDisc. It's just an app on your phone. Or if you just search into Google disc golf courses near me or disc golf shops near me, you should be able to find those pretty easily. If you go to any of those places and you see somebody, most people are going to be happy to answer any questions for you. But YouTube is a good place to answer those questions too. So, but yeah, that's kind of the basic gist there. Golf with a disc, pretty easy to find everything. So, first, I'll start with the disc because it's probably the most confusing part, probably the most overwhelming. That's the word I'm looking for. The most overwhelming part of getting into disc golf is knowing what all the disc numbers mean and what every disc does, and all that stuff. And they have flight numbers on them, but honestly, it's not the best way to judge a disc's flight. They're not really standardized. They're all different. Every disc you get from a different company, they might do their flight numbers a little differently. And it's not something that's completely uniform yet. So it's not the best way to do it. You should use them as a reference for sure. If you're like looking at this and you're like, oh, it has these numbers, so it should do this, and that's a good way to judge a disc. But you want to go out and throw it before you just take those numbers and run with it. So before I start talking about numbers, which I will get into that. I'll go over all four numbers there, so I'll give you an idea. But I want to just talk about discs from kind of a little bit more experienced standpoint, somebody who just knows a little more um, than just the disc numbers, because it's not all it is. So first, you have the type of disc. You're going to have a distance driver, which is going to look something like this. It's got a thicker rim, a little more poppy. You're going to have a fairway driver or control driver, which is going to look like this, with a little bit skinnier of a rim. Then you're going to have a mid-range. It's going to look something like this. It's going to have more of a blunt rim rather than a blade. Boom. And then you're going to have a putter, which are in here. It's going to have more of a rounded, a little bit deeper disc to putt with. So we'll get into those here. You're going to throw a putter, obviously, when you're putting. You're also going to throw a putter on what we call an upshot. So when you're close to the basket, but you're not, I'd say, over like 300 feet or so. When you're inside of that, honestly, you're probably going to a putter. And I'll talk about putters, mid-ranges later for beginner players. I'm on the same boat as many people who suggest putters and mid-ranges to new players at the beginning. And honestly, I started throwing drivers when I first started playing, and then I decided to cut myself off, and I got so much better because I just went through putters and mid-ranges only for a matter of months. So putter is going to be a great shot for you when you need something to go fairly straight. It's not going to move as much as any of the other discs. It's going to go pretty dang straight, and it's going to sit. So when it hits the ground, putters are more likely to just sit and not roll away, while a driver or a fairway or mid-range might pick up and start rolling away from the basket and give you a longer putt and hurting your score. So that's the putters, and obviously you putt with them. And we got a mid-range. So a mid-range is probably some of my favorite discs to throw, just because they're always pretty comfortable to me. I feel like they're most comfortable discs for me to throw. and you can kind of rip on these guys. And honestly, most of my mid ranges go just about as far as my drivers. And they're not clearly, obviously, not going to go super far, but like a controlled driver shot and a power mid range shot for me are like kind of the same. So you catch me throwing this Buzz OS a lot, a lot. I love this disc. And you're gonna be able to throw these off the tee, especially if you're a beginner, and they're gonna go a lot straighter and a lot more controlled than a distance driver. So I'd really recommend picking up a couple different mid ranges with different flight numbers, which we'll get into here in a little bit. And just kind of playing with them and seeing how you feel about them, and you'll have a lot more success and a lot more fun if you start with some middle speed, lower speed putters and mid ranges. So, and then the rest of my favorite discs are usually fairway drivers. You guys have probably, if you've watched any of my videos before, you've heard me talk about the Athena. I love the Athena. It's a great disc. It's a 7-speed disc, and it's a driver. It's going to go real far if you get a hold of it. The important thing about drivers and fairway drivers is getting them up to speed. So if your arm isn't fast enough to throw a disc fast enough, it's not going to do what it's supposed to do. So with this 7-speed, it's like, honestly, I recommend a 7-speed. Maybe not this specific disc, but a 7-speed to somebody who's is pretty athletic, has a faster arm speed, and just getting into the sport. Um, Honestly, I didn't really like follow these rules or whatever when I first started playing. I just grabbed a ton of discs, and it was fun. And you still are gonna get better. Um, but to like see like real improvement and be able to like, oh, that's how a disc is supposed to throw out fly. You should start with a slower disc. But these are really controllable. I really like the Athenas. I've had like 6 of them, and I've talked about my videos of losing them. If you watch my video with my girlfriend Grace, she makes fun of me for losing them because I've had so many of them. But some of them that I've had are super overstable, which means when I throw it on backhand, they're going to go left. And some of them are super understable, which means they're going to go right. So like this specific one, it likes to go right on my hand. It's a little more understable than most of them that I've had. But there's other ones like this one in here that's a lot more overstable and it's going to go left. So I'll get into those terms in just a second after I get done with this too. But a fairway driver is what you're going to use when you need a distance shot, a shot that needs to go far, but you still want to have some control of it. Like one of these distance driver like this is it's going to have a lot more movement left or right than something like this, and it has a lot to do with these rims here. So it's a lot thinner, as you can see on the Athena versus this Salt, which is the distance driver I pull out of my bag to go over distance driver. And these are the big dogs. They're gonna come fast. You're gonna need a fast arm speed to throw them. This one specifically is a 12 speed, and honestly, I don't bother with that high of a disc speed of a disc very much. The only 2 discs that I have that are super fast in my bag are this and a Venom, and then everything else is lower than these. And honestly, I very rarely throw this. I threw it for a little while, but my go-to is generally something a little bit slower, like the Athena or a Heat or this Grace. Something that's just a little bit slower than these. But you can get some pretty crazy shots if you get a hold of them right. And those are the distance drivers. So next thing I want to get into is I kind of mentioned the overstable, understable stuff right there. And I want to talk about those because those are probably the most important part of understanding the discs is understanding overstable, stable, and understable. So an overstable disc is going to be one that has a lot of fade, which fade is going to be the last number on the flight numbers chart. And I'm trying to find a good example here, like this Captain's Raptor here. Hopefully you can see that there. It has a 4 fade, which is that last number. So what that means, if I throw this on a backhand, it's going to want to get left super fast. It has a ton of fade, which means it's wanting to fight out and get left. So an overstable disc like this is what you're going to want to use when you have a shot. If you're throwing backhand, of course. If you're going to throw forehand, it's going to be the opposite. So just keep that in mind. But if you're throwing backhand, let's say you have a hole where there's a bunch of trees on the left and the right is wide open, you're going to want to throw a big hyzer shot or an overstable disc out wide and let it come back towards the basket. It'll be the easiest way to avoid all the trees. And it'll just, you know where the disc is going to go because an overstable disc is going to go left. So there's that. And then we'll go straight to an understable disc, which this is a crazy understable disc. We have a Mamba. And as you can see, the numbers on this one are pretty much the opposite of the Captain's Raptor here. It has a -5 and then a 1 for the fade. And the -5 is what we call turn. So it turns into the opposite. So I told you that the Captain's Raptor there is going to go left. This one wants to go right. This one wants to go straight to the right out of your hands. A lot of people will throw a roller with this disc. So a roller, you throw a understable disc on a anhyzer line, which we'll also get into. Lots of terms here. Um, but if you do that, it's just going to keep turning and turning and turning, and it wants to turn like this. So if you throw it super hard and you throw it on an angle, it's going to like even get to a point where it rolls. So, or if you throw it up in the air, it's just going to keep turning this way. Whereas this one wants to do the opposite and it wants to turn that way. And then we have right in the middle, which is going to be a stable disc, which honestly, a lot. It's a putter, but it's a great example because it is a 0.5, 0.5. And it's going to go super straight. Like if you release this one straight, it wants to stay straight. So it's going to do less of the whole right left thing like these ones would. And of course, it's a putter, so it's going to do even less. So it's a crazy straight disc. And as I'm talking about those, I'll throw some clips in. So you guys have already seen those. But um, that's kind of the idea there is overstable, understable, and stable. So there's just a kind of a scale there. And there's infinite number of discs that can fill that line there and kind of fill different slots for you. So after you know that stuff, we can get into the ways you can throw, which honestly I could have done before that, but that's okay. You're going to have a backhand throw, which I'll show all these too, so they should be playing. You're going to have a forehand throw, and then you're going to have maybe a tomahawk, which is going to be over your head, a roller, and there's others, but those will be the four that I just show on screen for you guys. Just give you a general idea of a couple of things that you can do, a couple ways that you can throw the disc right now. So like I said with the backhand, if you throw a backhand on hyzer, which hyzer is, if you're throwing a backhand, is like this. You're going to release it like this. This might be a little extreme, but that's the angle that it would be. If you're going to throw it flat, it's going to be more like that. If you're throwing an anhyzer, you're releasing like this. Those are three ways you can throw it, and you can kind of throw a lot of different shots just based on changing your angle like that. Instead of changing a disc necessarily, you can almost just change the angle that you throw it on, and it can be a whole different disc. So, like for example, if I were to throw the Captain Raptor that I was talking about on a whole bunch of anhyzer like this, so I'm gonna release it like this when I throw it, and I'll show a little clip of it here so you guys can see it. It's gonna want to fight out of it on the release angle because it wants to get left, like I said, but you threw it on this big old turnover shot, so it's gonna turn and get back, and that's what we call a flex line. So flex lines are super fun, and you can kind of do the same thing with a understable disc if you throw it on a hyzer as well. Um, so instead of throwing it on a hand hyzer, you throw a turn disc like this, and it's gonna do the same thing and fight out. So that's a flex line. And then I kind of mentioned this earlier, but you can also throw like a spike hyzer with the stable disc, where you just throw it crazy like this on a hyzer shot, and it's gonna just hold it and it's gonna spike into the ground because it still wants to keep turning left, and you already have it there. It's gonna spike just like that. So that's kind of the gist there. Hopefully, I kind of covered it all pretty decently. I'll add anything on the screen if I feel like I missed something when I'm editing, but I also wanted to talk about how discs can fly differently for different people. So, for example, if I throw this mamba, and I'm gonna take my buddy Jonah that you guys saw in the last video, for example. He's actually hanging out with me here. It's a little hot, so he's getting some shade just like I am right now. But if I throw this disc, it's gonna want to kind of turn a lot, like a lot, which turn, like I said, is understable, so it's gonna go to the right. Whereas if Jonah throws it, he doesn't have as fast of an arm speed as I do and doesn't get as much spin on the disc. So when he throws, it's not going to turn as much. It might turn a little bit, or it's going to go flat and turn the other way. But since I have a faster arm speed, mine's going to want to turn a whole bunch while his doesn't want to turn as much. So depending on your arm speed, your spin, how you release it, the wind, a disc is going to fly different for each person. So like if you're watching my videos and you're looking at the disc and you're like, oh, I like how that one flies, it might not necessarily fly the exact same for you. So the best way to do it is to, if you're out on the course with friends or you're going to a league, just ask somebody to throw their disc so you can try it and get an idea before you go ahead and buy it. But I mean, you can't really go wrong at having more discs. You're just gonna have more options. The more discs you have, you throw them all once, you see what they do, and you're like, oh, I can put that in here, or that does the same thing as this. So everything's gonna be a little different. So I'll cover the flight numbers kind of a little more in depth now than I did a minute ago. I kind of went over turn and fade briefly there, and those are honestly the important ones. But here we've got the first number is going to be your speed. So this one's an 11 speed, which makes it a distance driver, which you can see right above. And the speed has a lot to do with the rim. Um, and how thick the rim is. And the higher the speed, the more arm speed you're going to need to make it do what it's supposed to do. With 11 speed, you have to rip it pretty hard to get it to do exactly what. Sorry, excuse me. Get it to do exactly what you want it to do. Um, so speed is important, but speed doesn't necessarily mean distance. Just because a disc says it has an 11 speed doesn't mean it's going to go farther necessarily. Because if you can't get it up to speed, it's not going to go as far. Like when I told you I went to putters and drivers for a while. At that point in time, like this this putter was going to go just as far as this 11 speed driver, and this is a either 2 or 3 speed driver. I don't know, but a 2 speed, 11 speed can go the same distance if you don't have the arm speed to throw the 11 speed. So then we get into the second number, which on this one is going to be a 6, and that's for the glide. So the glide is kind of how long it's going to stay in the air, how much it's going to want to stay floating above the air, rather than kind of taking a dive. Like take these two comparison. These are the two I've been using the whole video. Captain's Raptor has a three glide, and the Mamba has a 6 glide. So obviously the Mamba's going to want to stay in the air, while this one's going to try to dive on you and get to the ground quick. And there's uses for both. Of course, you're trying to throw a super long shot. You're going to want to throw a glidey disc. If there's wind, you're not going to want to throw a glidey disc. You're going to want to throw something that's going to get to the ground quick so the wind doesn't take it. Or if you have a tree down the fairway, you need to get it low quicker than you need to go up in the top of the tree. You want to get to the bottom of the tree or something. There's situations where that comes into play. So that's glide for you. And then we've got turn and fade, which I kind of mentioned earlier. The turn is going to be first, the fade is going to be last. And the turn, a disc with more turn is more understable, which we mentioned earlier. If you throw on a backhand, understable disc is going to turn to the right, whereas an overstable disc is going to turn to the left. So a high turn is going to be understable, and a high fade is going to be overstable. And then if it has about equal numbers or no numbers, like 0, 0, it's gonna be more straight. It's not gonna go right or left as much. So like I said, those are the flight numbers kind of explained briefly for you, and use them as a reference, but don't base like the entire disc off of the numbers, because like let me show you for example. What's a good example? Yeah, let's take these two. Like I have these two discs here. It's my Grace and my Salt. The Grace is 11, 6, negative 1, 2. She assumed it'd be a little more overstable because it has a 2 fade. And while this one is, I think it's off the top of my head, I think it's 12, 5, negative 1, 3. So this one should be even more overstable on this one. But from the numbers, it sounds like they're probably fairly similar, right? Like it sounds like maybe this one goes a little bit more left, it's a little faster, about the same glide, all that stuff. But honestly, when I throw the Grace, it's more understable for me. When I throw it, it wants to turn, and that could be the specific disc. Like there's variation in the disc as well. But I expect these to be similar, and the Grace is going to turn away to the right for me. It may not way to the right, but it's going to turn right. And this one has almost no shot at going right. Like it wants to kind of flip up for a little bit, and then it wants to get back left. So they're very different, and I bet even if I got another Grace like this, it could do something completely different. I could get a Grace that flies more true to the numbers, and then I throw it against this one, and this one might go ooh, and the other one might be more like the Salt that I was talking about a second ago, where it flies like that. So there's variation in the discs. There's variation in people out on the ways people throw. So like use them as a reference, but don't just believe every flight number you see. You might want to test it out first, and just kind of see what it does for you, because it's going to be different for everybody. So that's discs. They're the most fun part of disc golf, probably. Going into the store and just looking at all the options, seeing the cool stamps, seeing all your discs up on the shelves, and being able to just grab a bunch and run out to the course. But there's also a few things you need to know if you're going out to play disc golf for the first time. Of course, if you're just going to play for fun, do whatever you want. Have fun with it. It's supposed to be fun, and that's kind of my advice for getting into disc golf. Is you don't have to follow the rules from the get-go. If you're just learning, do whatever. If you're in a terrible spot, step out and throw it out of the terrible spot. But if you do show up to some sort of league or you're playing with some friends who have already played before, they might have a couple rules. So I'm just going to kind of run you through the basic rules that you might see um, in disc golf. The first one is going to be your lie. Your lie is where your disc lands. So you're going to throw it off the tee box. You have to stay, can't go all over the tee box, but you have the whole tee box and beyond to run up and throw it. And then once you throw it, you're going to be somewhere out, either in the rough or the fairway or in a tree or whatever. And your lie is going to be on the ground. It's going to be where you throw from. And you're just going to be on the ground. And I'll throw a clip in of what that kind of looks like. But you're going to walk up to your disc, and you can either place a mini in front of your disc, which a mini looks like something like this. This is a mini Ultra Star, but I've got a whole bunch of them in here. That's more of a traditional one. And you're going to get like a piece of paper behind either your disc, or if you put the mini down, you get the same piece of paper behind the mini. So I'll kind of show an example of that. You've probably seen that in the video already, but that's where you have to have your foot when you release the disc. If you're on the fairway and you're way outside of the basket, like more than 33 feet, you can technically still run up and get your throw in as long as your foot's planted on that piece of paper when you release the disc. Um, you can't be to the right or to the left. You have to be right behind it on that piece of paper. You can't be too far back. You got to be on that piece of paper. But that's kind of what your lie entails there. And then you're going to have places that are marked as out of bounds or a hazard. And those are going to be places where you take a penalty stroke. So you're going to have +1 onto your score for that hole. And if it's marked as out of bounds, if it goes out, you kind of come back where you think it went out of bounds the first instance that it crosses the line. And you get a meter off the out of bounds from there, kind of as a relief, and you throw your mini down and you play from there. Or if it's marked as a hazard, that means it's usually safe to get into. It's just marked as like an out of bounds area. You play from that spot that your disc landed, but you also take an extra stroke. So those are two things to look out for. You also need to look out for a mandatory, which is going to be marked on either a tree or a sign or a post. And it means you have to keep your disc to either left, right, of that mandatory. So like when you throw off the tee box, generally they're going to be off tee boxes, unless you whiff and have to go around on your second shot, which does happen. But let's say you have a hole, there's a tree right off the front on your right side that's pointing left. That means you have to keep the disc to the left side of that tree. And if you don't, you're probably going to take an extra stroke, and you're going to have to go to a drop zone that's usually marked on the course somewhere, usually just right underneath the mandatory there. So that's mandatories for you. You don't see a ton of them, but you will see them if you go to a nicer of a course or a more challenging course. You might see a lot more mandatories. And then last thing I wanted to cover was putting. So if you're within 33 feet of the basket, there's kind of a ring around the basket where you can't step over your disc. You have to be balanced. You have to stay behind your disc until it goes in the basket. So if you're like at 25 feet, you line up for your putt and you putt it and you step over your disc and your left foot lands before it gets there, you don't show that you have balance, you're going to take an extra stroke if you're playing against people who are watching you and kind of want to beat you. So if you're playing on your own, I mean, of course, you can do whatever you want. But if you're planning to get better and maybe go show up to a league or a tournament, you're going to want to practice putting within 33 feet without stepping over your disc, and making sure you stay on that lie with your foot there. And of course, when you're in the putting green, like I told you about the minis earlier, you can put it right in front of your disc in line with the basket and kind of get like a couple inches, a little bit closer to the basket. So I'd recommend having a mini if you're looking to play a little bit of more competitive disc golf, so you can put it there and gives you an extra inch or two where you can put your foot and just have that balance and then all that stuff. So that's for circle one. If you're outside of circle one, you can make a step over the disc, as long as you release it before your foot hits, or if you take a jump, as long as you release it before you land on the ground past your disc. So, and that's all the way out. So once you get to that point, after 33 feet, you kind of have the freedom there, as long as your foot's on your lie and you let go of it before you leave that spot or before you touch anywhere else. You're good. So those are just kind of some basic rules. And like I was talking about, like leagues and tournaments, you can find those on that UDisc app that I was talking about. Um, and those happen all over the place. You can even go online. I think it's called like disc golf scene. You can find events like that as well. Um, but yeah, so if you're playing for a little while, you get started and you're like, wow, I want to play with some people, and you know how a lot of people play with. That's a good way to find them is those leagues. So I haven't covered everything when it comes to disc golf. I mean, there's a lot, and I feel like even when I was talking about the disc earlier, it's still overwhelming. And if I feel like something was confusing in there, I'll clarify it on the screen for you guys. But really, disc golf is meant to be fun. I mean, it's a sport, it's a game. Um, it's like golf. It's honestly it's less frustrating golf is what it is to me. And don't get me wrong, you're still gonna get frustrated sometimes. You'll see it in my upcoming videos here. I just recorded one that I'm gonna post after this one, um, throwing only the watt, and I got frustrated because I felt like I wasn't playing good. But you guys can remember it's a fun thing to do. You're getting outside, grab your friends, grab your family, and you might find a new hobby because I've been playing for a little over a year now, and I'm out here every day. I love it. I'm making videos for it. So yeah, if you need a hobby, give it a shot. I bet you'll love it. And there's endless stuff here on YouTube. There's gonna be more coming from me. There's a whole bunch of other people who make stuff on here. So if you have any questions about anything, just hit the YouTube or find somebody who plays disc golf in your area, and kind of adopt them as your mentor. A lot of people are gonna be happy to do it. It's a growing sport and it's a lot of fun. So check it out. Hope you guys have fun on the course. Go find you some discs and play disc golf. Thanks for watching. Bye.